back to the show. This is The Law Show on CL 650.
It's a legal matter, baby. A legal matter from now on.
Hey, and welcome to the show. This is The Law Show on CL 650. I'm Zach Spencer, and joining me in studio, Kevin Hyde, partner at McQuarrie Hunter, and Nate Hartney is associate at McQuarrie Hunter, both in the personal injury department there. And when you are involved in a vehicle accident, sometimes you don't know what to do. I mean, they get that little checklist they give you when you buy your insurance. They have a little form what to do, but we're looking at it from a slightly different viewpoint, is if somebody's injured, you want to have as much information to help with you with your case as you go forward. So what do you recommend, and what are the biggest mistakes people make when they leave the scene of an accident? What haven't they collected?
Yeah, well, of course, Zach, it depends on the severity of the accident itself. If your airbags are off and you're stuck in your vehicle,
and you're going to the hospital, it's a different story.
Yeah, that's a different story. But in the case where you're rear-ended and you're able to get out of the vehicle on your own power, there's a few things that are very obvious you have to do. Of course, you have to exchange information with the other driver. You should get a look at their driver's license.
The one thing I always say is take a picture of it with your phone, right?
Yeah, nowadays everyone seems to have a cell phone, so pull that cell phone out and get busy. So the obvious things like the other vehicle, the damage to it, the other person's driver's license and information, their insurance and whatnot, the make of the vehicle. But then there's some less obvious things you probably want to take some photos of as well. The interior of your vehicle. If something was knocked off the seat, that can go to the force of impact. Take a photo of that. Say
you mean something hits you?
Your briefcase was on the seat next to you. It falls over your lunch kit, and that falls on the ground. Well, that shows that despite maybe minimal damage, the impact was fairly significant.
I thought you meant something in the car hit you. No. You jammed on the brakes, and that can happen, right?
Yeah,
something
exactly.
inside the car can hit you. Okay,
yeah.
So you want to show that your coffee was spilled and your briefcase fell over, those sorts of things.
As well as some other things outside. Take some photos of the other vehicle, any skid marks there is from that vehicle attempting to stop. That again can show perhaps the speed the vehicle was traveling at when it hit you, the length of the skid marks, and so on. Another obvious thing, of course, look around for other witnesses to that accident. Get down all their information as well, their phone number, their full name, get them to spell it out for you. So you'll need all that. And then you need to report that accident right away, call the police if necessary.
So what is the sort of line from when the police need to get involved? Because I remember as a kid, police were always called to vehicle accidents, and now you rarely see police at an accident. So when should you call the police?
Well, I think you should maybe call the police in all accidents, and they're probably going to ask you, is anyone in distress? Are you able to leave the scene on your own, will? But, and they might not attend if the case is that both of you are okay, that vehicles are drivable, you don't need a tow truck. The police might not attend in that scenario. But it's always a good idea to call them. And then you can report the accident to ICBC. That being said, you don't want to report too much to ICBC about your injuries. They're going to ask about them, but you should see a lawyer before you provide any type of statement to them verbally over the phone regarding your injuries.
So you just want to give the basic information. I was involved in an accident. It was this location. This was the other driver. This was the vehicle. I have pictures.
Exactly.
And then they say, well, what are the extent of your injuries? What do you say?
Well, you could just tell them be very vague that I'm injured. I've sustained some injuries. If you're off work, you can let them know that, and then stop there. And, you need to go see a lawyer at that point, depending on how serious these injuries are. Lawyers themselves can actually draft up the statement that you're required to give. We usually keep it very, vague at the start, provide that statement that fulfills that obligation.
And what's the timeline on that? So when do you have to give that document to them?
It's within a reasonable amount of time. You have to fill out a CL22, and then usually they ask for a statement, depending on the situation, perhaps on liability as well. And you don't want to make a mistake in that, especially if liability is in dispute. So it's best to talk to a lawyer and have the lawyer do the work. And
liability means the amount that you're going to be found at fault. Right?
Who's at fault? If liability is in dispute, is who's at fault for this accident. So you could be, ICBC can make a various decision. They could do split liability or hold one party 100% at fault, hold you 100% at fault. So if liability is the issue, you definitely want to talk to a lawyer in that situation.
So basically, if you're in an accident where you've been injured at all, you should really contact a lawyer, like call McQuarrie Hunter and say, listen, this has happened to me. And working with that client, you can decide whether if it's serious or what.
Exactly, and there's no. You can come in and see us, and it's a free consult. We'll meet with you. We'll go through the whole process. We'll answer your questions for you. We'll take away some of that stress you might be feeling with the ICBC adjuster breathing down your neck, calling you constantly, asking for details about yourself, asking you to sign releases for your medical information and whatnot. We can explain all that to you.
Now, on a previous show, I found out that once you sign that away, you can't put the horse back in the barn, right? Like
Nope.
if there's an injury that lingers longer than you thought or develops and becomes worse, maybe you get chronic migraines, for example, you can't go back and ask for more. You need to establish that with your lawyer.
Yeah, in very rare circumstances, you can go back on that, but it's an uphill battle for sure. So once you sign that release and you take that settlement money in exchange for the release, you're stuck. So if you sign a settlement agreement a couple of weeks after the accident, then you find you're having a chronic injury that lasts you, a back or neck problem that lasts you years and years, and you still aren't able to return to whatever activities, recreational activities you did before, or it's affecting your day-to-day activity at work, whether it's, you can't sit at a desk for more than 20 minutes or whatnot. You didn't know that right after the accident when you settled their claim. So you potentially took a much smaller amount of money than you would have otherwise been entitled to. So it's best, again, to come and talk to us or a lawyer, and we can advise you and put you on the right path.
So that's a vehicle accident, 2 vehicles involved. But let's turn this on its head. What if you get into a hit and run, whether a vehicle hits your vehicle and leaves, or a vehicle hits you personally while you're on the sidewalk, for example, or on your bicycle and leaves? What should you do?
So if you are injured in a hit and run, there are a number of things that you have to do that most people are not aware of. Because in a hit and run, you're going to be suing ICBC, and they are liable for up to $200,000 in damages to you. But you're only able to access that insurance if you do what is described under the statute as taking all reasonable efforts to identify the hit and run driver.
Is this an advantage of having a one insurance system? There's only one insurance company. I mean, in Ontario, you might have 30 or 40 different insurers, but with ICBC, we're dealing with this government.
Yeah, I think when it comes to hit and run, I think it probably is an advantage to have the monopoly insurer. But ICBC doesn't tell you this when you get in a hit and run.
No.
Nobody will tell you that you need to do these things.
So what do you need to do?
So the courts have interpreted the phrase all reasonable efforts to identify the driver as including a number of things: contacting the police, calling ICBC and reporting it to them, knocking on doors, canvassing for witnesses, putting up signs, asking for witnesses to the accident. Because if you don't do those things and then you file a claim, ICBC will argue that you're entitled to nothing because you didn't take efforts to identify the driver. So it's very important immediately after you're in a hit and run that you call ICBC because then they know about the accident and they can do their own investigation. So they can't then argue that they were somehow prejudiced because they didn't know about it.
So you say it was a red sedan. It looked like it was from the 1990s. Yep. And if a red sedan from the 1990s comes in looking for repair work, they might be able to put those things together, right?
Sure, yeah. So it's very simple. Call ICBC, file a police report about it, knock on doors, put up signs. If you do all those things, you'll be fine. But again, ICBC won't tell you to do those things. You have to go see a lawyer, and the lawyer will explain all that.
I remember when I was a junior lawyer at the firm years ago, and one of our personal injury lawyers had me knocking because our plaintiff, our client, was too injured, but he was hit while he was on a motorcycle and sustained very serious injuries. So he contacted us, and we were retained shortly thereafter. And he had me going out. He was on the highway, but there was overlooking the highway. There was a bunch of houses, and I was knocking on doors up there and putting signs, little pamphlets on people's cars, looking for any witnesses, just to ensure that in the circumstances we satisfied our duty to take all reasonable steps, as Nate was saying, to locate this unidentified driver. And we actually had someone who witnessed the whole accident, could provide a statement and confirming some of the identifying the vehicle more accurately than what our actual client did. And I think ICBC eventually did, in that case, find who the driver was.
So
the advantage was we weren't just limited to that 200,000.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah,
located them.
because you're limited to $200,000 if you can't find somebody. But if you do get somebody that has a policy, and then you can go after whatever they're.
And then we had the $2 million policy. I think it was in this case, and we didn't. This wasn't a $2 million claim, but at least it wasn't limiting us to that 200,000. It was definitely a claim worth much more than 200,000.
And when you're in a hit and run, I mean, you want to try and get as much information with your own eyes as to what you saw, but you've just been hit. You're not really thinking straight.
Well, yeah, and the courts are pretty forgiving when it comes to these hit and run claims and what efforts people take. They understand that the more serious the accident, you're not expected to go out there immediately and be playing detective if you're injured. So it's always best just to talk to a lawyer right away, because the lawyer will tell you exactly what you need to do. Or, like Kevin says, we'll send people out to do those things.
Mm-hmm. It's whatever's reasonable in the circumstances, depending on the injuries. But
all right,
you need to be aware of that.
From Macquarie Hunter, we have Kevin Hyde and Nate Hartney, and we're going to continue our conversation. We're going to touch on, after the break, ICBC, and they've had advertising on television, radio, and in the newspapers about people exaggerating claims, and this is a big reason why they have such high premiums, and they want to raise premiums. So we'll touch on that and more when we continue next on CL 650.
There's more of the show still ahead. This is The Law Show on CL 650.